Thank God he's gone, Johnson. Congratulations to us. The words did not tremble. They flew, bold, loud, and final, across the golden silence of the hall. Dozens of heads turned at once, disbelief cracking through grief like lightning. Juliana stood at the front, her fingers laced with a man who didn't belong there. A navy blue suit, clean shave, unfamiliar face. Not family, not mourning. She raised their joined hands like they were at a wedding, not a funeral. In the center of the room, beneath white roses and dripping chandeliers, the golden casket gleamed. Inside it, Jonathan Oina, billionaire industrialist and supposed corpse, lay still. Juliana's voice was clear, cruel in its calmness. All the company documents are with me. Tomorrow, we change the ownership. After that, Maldives. Our honeymoon. There it was again, that word. Honeymoon. A woman in the second row gasped and dropped her fan. Someone whispered, Maldives? Another echoed, ownership. Jonathan's best friend, Sam, took a half step forward, paralyzed. He had ordered that golden casket himself at dawn. Chosen every white rose, every candle. He had signed every form with trembling hands. This funeral had broken something in him. Now this woman, his best friend's wife, was talking about changing paperwork and booking flights? But Juliana wasn't done. She turned slightly, looked at the gleaming casket, and scoffed. This is too expensive. Return it. We'll bury him in something cheaper. That was when the crack came, not in the coffin, but in the room. Someone gasped too loud. Another cursed. A third stood up, face red, hands shaking. The ushers tried to calm the chaos, but the words had already pierced the illusion. People cried out. Phones went up. Cameras flashed. And in that chaos, no one noticed the sound. No one but Sam. The golden casket creaked. Just slightly. Just enough. Sam blinked. Stared. Took a step closer. He had helped plan this moment, and yet nothing could have prepared him for the reality of it. Inside the casket, behind closed eyes, Jonathan heard everything. The room had changed. Its temperature. Its breath. Its truth. And he knew now. Juliana had failed the test. Still, he waited. 5 more seconds. Then 6. And then, he opened his eyes. Only hours earlier, Lagos had still been blue and quiet with mourning. The world hadn't yet learned of the death of Chief Jonathan Oina. Because it hadn't happened. Not really. In a quiet corner of Banana Island, a black SUV waited at the gates. Inside the study, Jonathan stood alone, staring at a framed photo on his bookshelf. A wedding photo. 10 years ago. His smile wide. Her eyes full of light. He touched the glass with 2 fingers, like it might still be warm. 10 years. No children. No explanation. Only prayers that went unanswered, rooms that felt colder with every season, and dinners that ended in silence. He had tried. They both had. But the weight had shifted somewhere along the way. The warmth left, and in its place, shadows grew. Lately, there were more shadows than light. Late-night messages. Trips she couldn't explain. Conversations cut short. The name Johnson appearing more than once. A name she refused to explain. He had ignored it. At first. Then he started listening. And what he heard broke him. So he made a plan. Not for revenge. For clarity. If there's any truth left, he whispered to the morning air, today we'll find it. By 7 a.m., the private doctor arrived with a discreet medical team. By 8, the household staff were given the official announcement. The chief had passed quietly in his sleep. By 9, the news had reached the company's inner circle. Phones buzzed. Emails flew. Lagos held its breath. By 11:30, the golden casket stood at the front of the grand hall. A hidden ventilation tube allowed him to breathe. A tiny earpiece fed him every sound. A camera hidden in the chandelier let Sam observe the reactions. And at exactly 12 o'clock noon, she walked in. Juliana, not in widow's black, but something darker, ambition. Her makeup was perfect. Her face unreadable. And she wasn't alone. She entered with Johnson. Sam felt his throat close. Cameras rose like a field of corn. Gas shot across the room. Who is that? Someone whispered. He's a supplier. Another answered. I've seen him once. Maybe twice. Juliana looked at no one. She walked straight to the casket with quiet confidence. And then she said it. Thank God he's gone. Inside the coffin, Jonathan felt the last piece of himself snap. The grief was gone now. This was something sharper. Something surgical. But he stayed still. She talked. About documents. About changing names. About flights in Maldives and plans that tasted like betrayal. Someone shouted from the crowd, "Have you no shame?" Juliana just smiled and lifted her chin. And then she said it. The line that would make history. "This casket is too expensive. Return it." Sam's eyes filled with tears. 10 years ago, he and Jonathan had shared a single plate of rice and a dream. They had built everything together. Every contract, every door, every step. And now this. He moved toward the casket. A guard whispered, "Don't." But it was too late. The lid creaked. Juliana's mouth froze mid-sentence. The man she thought she had buried opened his eyes. Jonathan sat up. Gasps exploded across the room like fireworks. Someone screamed. Phones shook in trembling hands. Reporters dropped their pens and reached for cameras. He didn't look at anyone, just her. Juliana took a step back, her mouth trembling, her knees starting to bend. She made a small sound, like a child waking from a nightmare. But it wasn't a dream. He stood, slowly, one hand steadying himself against the edge of the golden box she had just called too expensive. And when he finally spoke, his voice was soft. So soft it hushed the room. "What have I ever done to you to deserve this?" Juliana couldn't answer. He stepped closer. "My father taught me a man can survive a storm, but not a lie inside his home." The chandelier above chimed faintly, as if the truth had hit crystal. And just then, the heavy doors at the back of the hall opened. A lawyer entered, black suit, red-sealed folder in hand. Sam stood still. Juliana's hand trembled in Johnson's. Jonathan didn't take his eyes off her as he raised one hand. The guards moved. Johnson was pulled forward. The lawyer came close and opened the folder. Jonathan's voice cracked. Juliana read this. She shook her head. "Read it," he said again. She took the paper with shaking hands. Her eyes moved over the first line, then the second, and her lips parted, but no words came. Because just then, the back wall lit up, and her voice, her own voice, filled the room. "Thank God he's gone, Johnson. Congratulations to us." Her voice filled the hall like thunder. "Thank God he's gone, Johnson. Congratulations to us." It was her, Juliana. Not just her voice, but her smile, her lipstick, her excitement. The screens behind the casket played a video taken at the airport lounge. She was leaning close to Johnson, whispering in hushed triumph. "All the company's documents are in my possession. Tomorrow, we'll change the ownership, get married, and fly to the Maldives." The footage froze. Her laughter, sharp and certain, echoed for a second longer than it should have. Gasps again. Some people covered their mouths. Others turned to look at her. Juliana didn't move. Not a blink. Not a word. Jonathan watched her closely. Every flicker of emotion. Every drop of color fading from her face. Her fingers slipped from Johnson's. Her mouth opened, but no explanation came. Only silence. And then, the screens changed again. Another clip. Another blow. She was speaking to Johnson again, more relaxed now, joking. "This golden one is too expensive," she said with a laugh. "We'll return it and bury him in something cheaper." Laughter. From her. About a coffin. The screen went black. A silence heavier than any scream filled the room. Then slowly, all eyes shifted back to the man who had been in that coffin. The man now standing tall. The man who had listened to every word. Jonathan Oina. Juliana dropped the divorce papers. They scattered across the marble floor like broken trust. "Jonathan," she whispered, her voice finally cracking. "It's not what you think. Please, please let me explain." Jonathan lifted one hand. Enough. The word was soft, but it cut like a blade. He took a step closer. His face wasn't angry, just tired. 10 years, Juliana. 10 years I stood by you. Through every doctor's appointment. Through every failed test. Through every night you cried yourself to sleep, and I held my tongue. His voice broke. For 10 years, I kept my vows. I never stopped believing in us. Even when the world mocked me for not taking another wife. I waited. Tears filled his eyes. "And this is how you repay me? With him? With plans to erase my name before I'm even cold in the ground?" Juliana fell to her knees, her expensive gown pooling like water. Her mascara ran, her hands shook. "I was lonely," she sobbed. I felt like nothing. Like I was failing you. Failing myself. Everyone looked at me like I was broken. Like I was less of a woman because I couldn't give you a child. Johnson, he made me feel wanted." Another wave of gasps. Jonathan's shoulders stiffened. That word. Wanted. Sam, still silent until now, stepped forward. Wanted. His voice was like gravel. You call betrayal wanting? He wanted the company. That's all. You were a path, not a partner. Juliana shook her head. No, no, that's not true. But Johnson finally spoke. His voice low, detached, regretful, but not enough. Juliana, he said quietly, you should stop. She turned sharply. What do you mean? Tell them. Tell them you love me. Tell them we planned a life. He looked away, and in that moment, her betrayal was repaid in kind. She reached for him, but he stepped back. Jonathan turned away for a moment, wiping his face with the back of his hand. When he faced the hall again, he was steady. My goal was never to humiliate her. My goal was truth. And today, he exhaled. The truth has spoken louder than I ever could. He nodded once. The guards moved. Gently, but firmly, they lifted Juliana to her feet. Johnson was pulled beside her. The lawyer cleared his throat and read from the document still lying on the floor. According to the marriage contract, signed 10 years ago, witnessed and sealed, any party caught in adultery shall forfeit all claims to joint property and inheritance. He paused, then looked up at her. Mrs. Juliana Oina, by your own words and by the evidence presented, you walk away with nothing. There were gasps, murmurs. A few people even clapped. Juliana's knees buckled again. She wailed, no, you can't do this to me. Jonathan, please, after everything, don't throw me away. Jonathan's voice was low, controlled. You threw us away the moment you chose him. The crowd shifted. The betrayal was no longer just a scandal. It was personal. You buried this marriage, he added, long before you tried to bury me. Sam stepped forward, quiet but firm. Take them out. The guards began moving them toward the back doors. Cameras followed. Phones recorded. Juliana fought, cried. Jonathan, please, don't leave me with nothing. I was weak, not wicked. I was drowning. He turned once more, and for a moment, his face softened. Grief, not rage, filled his eyes. I gave you everything, he whispered. My name, my trust, my heart. If that was nothing to you, then nothing is what you'll have. The doors slammed shut behind her. The hall breathed again. Sam placed a hand on Jonathan's shoulder. You did what you had to do. The whole world saw it. The whole world knows. But Jonathan didn't speak. He looked at the casket, the same one she had called too expensive, and for the first time since rising from it, he let the tears fall freely. Because beyond the shock, beyond the relief of truth revealed, there was loss. Real loss. The kind that doesn't fit into headlines or court clauses. Loss of 10 years. Loss of a woman he had tried to love through silence and sadness. Loss of the quiet future they once dreamed of. A childless home. 1,000 broken prayers. And something deeper, the ache of still wanting to forgive. Sam's voice came again. Jonathan, are you ready? The board is waiting. The press will want a statement. He shook his head. Give me a moment. He walked slowly back to the golden casket. His hand rested on the polished surface. The cameras stayed still. The guests stayed silent. Jonathan whispered, not to the room, to the box. I lay in you, pretending to be dead. But it was my heart she buried today. Then he turned, straighter than before, stronger, and stepped into the future. The gold casket had closed, but the war it opened was only beginning. By sunrise, every screen in Nigeria lit up with the same footage. A billionaire, thought dead, rising from his own coffin to expose his wife's betrayal. Live, in front of friends, family, and cameras. It was surreal, biblical, viral. Jonathan Oina rises from the dead. Wife caught with lover at funeral. Gold casket, cold heart. Lagos mourns a marriage. Wife of billionaire plotted ownership shift at husband's funeral. Talk show hosts reenacted the moment. News anchors debated morality and marriage. Hashtags trended. Hashtag casket comeback. Hashtag Judas Juliana. Hashtag justice for Jonathan. Inside Banana Island, however, the mood was colder than the storm outside. Jonathan sat alone in his study, unchanged since yesterday. The golden casket still stood in the corner like a monument to grief. He hadn't spoken in hours. He hadn't eaten. And despite the silence in the house, his ears were full of noise. The words. Her words. Thank God he's gone, Johnson. This casket is too expensive. We'll bury him in something cheaper. He had prepared himself to be betrayed. But not like that. Not in public. Not so raw. Not so cruel. Sam entered quietly, setting a glass of orange juice on the table. She's on TV, he said. Jonathan blinked slowly. Already. Prom time. Makeup done. Blue dress. Tear in her voice. She's playing the abandoned wife now. Jonathan didn't move. Sam sat beside him, hands clasped. You're the one who was abandoned. You gave her everything. She gave you a knife. Jonathan turned to the casket. I thought I was testing her heart. Turns out, I was testing mine. In a dingy hotel room miles away, Juliana sat cross-legged on the bed, staring into nothing. The woman who once commanded gala rooms and corporate dinners now wore a faded shirt. Her hair was tied back. Her wig lay discarded on the floor. But her posture was straight. Her anger, polished. Johnson paced. You need to get out of Lagos. We both do, he said. People want blood. I'm serious, Juliana. They're calling for investigations. The FCC. Even the church groups are turning on you. She didn't even blink. I said we have to. I'm not leaving, she said. He stopped walking. Then you're suicidal. I'm still his wife, she said calmly. Johnson laughed bitterly. You think that matters after what you said in that hall? She stood, voice like glass. He still loves me. I saw it in his face. You saw shame, he snapped. You ruined him. The board, the public, even his friends saw it. And you think he'll take you back? If he doesn't, she whispered, stepping closer, I'll ruin him further. Johnson frowned. You're joking. No. I know his empire. I built parts of it. I sat in meetings. I know what's offshore. Who owes who? Which deals can shake if I speak? You'd really burn it all? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. If I can't sit on the throne, I'll scorch it. Back in Banana Island, the legal team arrived with crisp suits and a sealed red folder. Chief, the lead lawyer said gently, the annulment documents are ready. With your signature, her legal ties to your estate, company, and private holdings are void. Jonathan picked up the pen, paused, put it down. Sam watched with rising frustration. Why? Jonathan stared out the window. We spent 10 years together. Sam's voice was hard. She used you, lied to you, humiliated you. And I still mourn her, Jonathan said. Not just the betrayal, the absence of what could have been. You think she's mourning you? She's mourning her fall, he murmured. But I'm mourning the dream. Sam's voice dropped. Then kill it properly. Sign it. Jonathan nodded slowly, but the pen remained untouched. That evening, Juliana appeared on national TV. She sat under soft lights, the camera catching every carefully rehearsed breath. Her voice was low, shaking just enough to seem real. I was alone, she said. He was a man of business. I was a woman of silence. Do you know what it's like to cry alone in a mansion? The host leaned forward. You felt neglected? I felt invisible. I begged him for love, for time. He gave me success. But I wanted a husband, not a business partner. There were tears now. Not too many. Just enough. I know what I did hurt him. I regret it. But I was drowning. The segment cut to black. The internet wept. Hashtag lonely wives matter. Hashtag I am Juliana. Hashtag neglect is abuse. Women across the country spoke of their own silent suffering. Bloggers dissected Jonathan's stoicism as emotional repression. Influencers called her brave. By midnight, public sympathy had begun to tilt. Sam watched the clip and slammed the remote down. She's rewriting the narrative. Jonathan was quiet. He had watched the same video twice. She's good, he said finally. She's dangerous. Jonathan exhaled. Maybe I made her that way. Sam snapped. No, don't do that. Don't carry her sins. I'm not excusing her. I'm just wondering if silence helped kill us. Sam didn't argue. He knew that tone, the soft, exhausted voice of a man trying not to drown in memory. The next morning, protesters gathered outside the mansion. Placards, microphones, journalists, drones overhead. The crowd wasn't just angry, it was divided. Some called for Juliana's arrest. Others demanded Jonathan apologize for emotional cruelty. Show us the full story, one sign read. Silence is abuse, said another. Jonathan Oina, husband or tyrant? Sam burst into the study. She's fueling this. Don't pretend it's coincidence. She wants the court of public opinion to reverse your victory. Jonathan stood, finally. No more hiding, he said. If she wants war, I'll meet her face to face. And if she brings fire? Sam asked. Jonathan's eyes narrowed. Then I'll show her what it means to rise from ashes. He walked to the window, looking at the restless city beyond. She was coming. And this time, she would not come with tears. Rain hammered the marble walls of the mansion like angry fists. Thunder rolled through the Lego sky, and somewhere outside the gates, the crowd chanted louder, angrier, more divided than ever. Justice for Juliana. She deserves a voice. No more billionaire silence. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Journalists camped beneath umbrellas, cameras ready, microphones pointed at every black car that passed. Guards stood rigid, unsure if they were holding back a protest or protecting a shrine. And then, at exactly 8:04 p.m., the front doors burst open. Juliana. She stood drenched, her black gown clinging to her like a second skin. Her hair was plastered to her face, her heels soaked, but her eyes were dry. She didn't look weak. She looked like a storm that had decided to knock on the front door. The guards tried to stop her. She pushed past them. Sam stepped in, but Jonathan raised a hand. Let her speak. The room held its breath. She walked into the hall as if it were still hers. The camera crews, trailing behind her like scavengers, began filming. The red light blinked alive. Millions would see this moment before sunrise. Jonathan Oina, she said, voice echoing. You humiliated me before the world. Tonight I speak. She turned to the cameras. You all saw the video he played. You saw the worst of me, edited and weaponized. But you didn't see the nights I cried alone in this mansion. You didn't see the woman begging her husband to come home. I didn't bury my husband. I buried my loneliness. Jonathan stood slowly. His white tunic shimmered under the chandelier. He looked tired, calm, unmoved. Yes, Juliana, he said. You cried. But so did I. I cried while watching the woman I loved disappear. I begged you without words, because I thought my silence was strength. I thought loyalty would speak louder than flowers. The room tensed. Juliana raised her chin. You neglected me. You betrayed me. I was broken. You sharpened your brokenness into a weapon. The air crackled. I was invisible, she shouted. You made me disappear, he roared back. Silence fell again. Even the storm outside seemed to pause. Juliana's voice dropped. You chose your empire over me. Jonathan stepped forward. And you chose my funeral as the launch pad for your new life. She trembled. He didn't stop. I would have given you everything, Juliana. I already did. My name, my wealth, my love. And what did you do with it? You put it in a suitcase with Johnson's shirts and called it a honeymoon. Her breath caught. Sam took a small step forward, but Jonathan held up his hand. Do you think this pain is easy for me? Do you think I enjoyed exposing you? I loved you. I still mourn the woman I married, even if she no longer exists. For the first time, Juliana's eyes shimmered. And then the mask cracked. I wanted to matter, she whispered. I wanted to feel like more than just a trophy in a house full of chandeliers. You were never a trophy, he said gently. You were the reason I built the house. A beat of silence. Then she stepped forward. Then let me come back, she whispered. No cameras. No empire. Just us. Let me fix it. The room went still. Sam's face twisted in disbelief. Jonathan didn't blink. You say you want me back. But it's not me you miss. It's the version of you that felt powerful beside me. That's not true, she breathed. You love the mirror I gave you, he said, not the man holding it. Juliana reached out as if to touch him. He stepped back. No. Her fingers curled in the air, empty. The cameras caught every frame. Then, suddenly, a new voice cut through the silence. Chief Oina, if I may. All eyes turned. It was the lawyer. He walked forward and opened a black folder. These are the financial records, he said, raising a document. During the past 2 years, Mrs. Juliana Oina funneled over 900 million Nigerian nairas into private accounts connected to Mr. Johnson Orikpo. Juliana gasped. That's not true. The lawyer continued. There are recordings, signed authorizations, forged email trails. Your digital signature was used to approve asset transfers days before the supposed funeral. The crowd buzzed. Even the camera crews hesitated, unsure if this was still a domestic feud or a criminal case. I was framed, Juliana cried. Jonathan stepped forward. Johnson used you, and you let him. He said he loved me. No, Jonathan said coldly. He wanted my throne, and you were the key. She collapsed to her knees, the wet fabric of her gown spreading around her like ink. "Please," she whispered, "don't let the world take everything." Jonathan's face was carved from stone. "You took everything from me, Juliana. But I rebuilt. I rose from the coffin you tried to seal. And now I choose peace." She looked up. "Peace," she croaked. "Peace is never loud," he said. "It comes after the storm. And you were the storm." He turned to the guards. "Escort her out. Gently." She didn't fight. As the guards helped her to her feet, she looked at him one last time. And he saw it, not love, not regret, but fear. The cameras followed her exit. Doors closed behind her like the end of a symphony. That night, the footage went global. The media spun their final headlines. Juliana removed from mansion after final plea. Jonathan Oina declares, "I choose peace." The fall of a queen, the rise of a king. But Jonathan didn't care. He sat alone on the balcony, watching the rain turn to mist. The city stretched before him, noisy and bright. Sam joined him with 2 cups of tea. "She's gone," he said. Jonathan nodded. "Do you feel free now?" "I feel clean," he said. "Not happy, just free." They drank in silence. In a dim hotel room across town, Juliana sat on the floor again. The cameras were gone now. The lights. The excuses. Only silence remained. And in it, she whispered the only words left to say. "I killed the only man who ever loved me." The storm passed, but the silence that followed was heavier than rain. Days after Juliana was escorted out of the mansion itself seemed to exhale. Staff spoke again. Curtains reopened. The scent of fresh lilies replaced the rot of betrayal. But Jonathan remained distant, like a man walking through the ruins of his own memory. In the press, he was hailed a hero, a visionary, a survivor. Online, millions praised his strength. Church leaders quoted him. CEOs called him a symbol of wisdom. But behind closed doors, he stared at the same old wedding portrait with a kind of hollow ache. Sam walked into the study one afternoon, holding an envelope. She filed nothing. No countersuit. No challenge. "She's gone quiet." Jonathan didn't answer. She lost everything. Property. Cars. Accounts. Even Johnson abandoned her. Left town. No one knows where. Still silence. Sam cleared his throat. "So what now?" Jonathan looked up slowly. "Now I rebuild. Not the company. Me." Rebuilding began in quiet ways. He returned to the office. Not with fanfare, but with purpose. He listened more. He delegated better. The board meetings once filled with numbers now included time for people's lives. He gave the casket away. Quietly. Anonymously. To a museum, where it stood as an exhibit titled "The Death That Changed a Man." He didn't date. Not for a long time. But one afternoon, at a financial summit in Victoria Island, a woman walked up to him after his panel. She wore no makeup. Her hair was in a bun. Her handshake was firm. "Natalia IB," she said. "Executive Director, Zenith Bank." Jonathan smiled for the first time in weeks. She didn't ask for a photo. She didn't mention the scandal. She just talked about inflation, risk strategy, and the odd joy of walking in Lagos without being noticed. They met again at a private dinner. And again, and again. A year passed. By then, people had stopped whispering about Juliana. She had disappeared completely. Jonathan and Natalia grew slowly, deliberately. There were no grand declarations. Only calm, respect, patience. When he finally proposed, it was not in a yacht or at a gala. It was in his garden, over breakfast. "I don't need a queen," he said. "I need peace." Natalia didn't cry. She nodded. "I am peace." The wedding made headlines again, but for different reasons. It wasn't loud. It wasn't gold. It was elegant and quiet. Lace, pearls, music played by a small quartet. Natalia wore ivory. Jonathan wore white. Sam gave the toast, his voice cracking only once. "If anyone here doubts that love can survive betrayal," he said, "look at my brother. He didn't just survive. He was reborn." And somewhere, far in the back of the room, unnoticed and hidden, sat Juliana, in a simple dress. No makeup, a headscarf wrapped tightly. She watched it all, the kiss, the applause, the dance. Then she left before dessert. Juliana's life had shrunk. After Johnson left her, the properties she thought were hers vanished overnight. Her name was dragged through courts and headlines. She was evicted from a Lekki apartment, then from a room in Suralere. Eventually, she rented a flat with peeling paint and a broken water heater. She took a job answering phones in a beauty clinic. No one recognized her. Every time she saw Jonathan on the news, opening a new foundation wing, receiving an honorary doctorate, smiling beside Natalia, she turned off the TV. But the pain didn't turn off. Late one night, she stared at a newspaper photo of him holding Natalia's hand. Tears slipped quietly down her cheeks. "That could have been me," she whispered. "If only I'd waited. If only I'd been enough." But the paper didn't answer, and the walls didn't care. Years passed. Jonathan and Natalia were happy. But happiness, as they learned, wasn't always simple. They tried for a child. Quietly, gently. But month after month brought the same empty result. People whispered, "Another barren wife." But Jonathan didn't flinch. He held Natalia's hand after each appointment, kissed her forehead, prayed quietly when no one saw. "I waited for you," he said once. "I can wait for more." Then, 6 years into their marriage, Natalia gasped in the middle of the night. A small white strip in her hand. 2 red lines. "Jonathan," she whispered, trembling. "I think I'm pregnant." He dropped to his knees, tears spilling freely. "God has remembered us," he wept. "He has remembered us." 9 months later, the hospital was filled with hushed chaos. Nurses rushed. Sam paced. A doctor gave a thumbs up through the window. And then the cry of a baby. Then another. Twins. 2 boys. Jonathan held them both, one in each arm, weeping openly. "My sons," he whispered. "My blood. My future." Natalia reached for him, tired but smiling. "We made it." He kissed her forehead. "We did." That night, the city celebrated. The company declared a holiday. Newspapers ran baby photos. Gifts poured in from around the world. The world had watched him fall. Now it watched him rise again, this time with 2 small hands gripping his thumbs. But far from the cameras, in a quiet, dimly lit room, Juliana saw the news. She stared at the photo of Jonathan, Natalia, and the twins. Her hands shook. Her mouth formed words, but none came out. "That could have been me," she whispered again. But this time, the sentence ended with a sob. And even as she wept, the world outside didn't slow. Later that night, Jonathan stood in his study. The twins slept in bassinets beside him. He looked at the corner where the golden casket once stood. Only a chair remained now. A plain chair. He turned to his sons. "I once buried myself alive," he said softly. "But love dug me out." He kissed each boy's forehead. "You are my proof. That pain is not the end." Natalia entered quietly, watching him from the doorway. He looked up, smiled, and whispered, "I rise." And so, from gold casket to baby cribs, from betrayal to blessing, Jonathan Oina rose again, not just in the eyes of the world, but in the heart of his own home. His past may have tried to bury him, but love had the final word. What's your view on this story? Where are you watching from? If you felt this journey, the fall, the fire, and the rise, don't forget to like, comment, and share. And if you want more stories like this one, hit subscribe. We've only just begun.